Welcome to the Fire Sprinkler Podcast with Chris and Logan. The enhanced line of Tyco Rapid Seal sprinkler adapters has grown to 11 expertly engineered fittings. Made with BlazeMaster CPVC compound for use in fire sprinkler systems, the redesigned lineup of adapters features a more compact design, providing improved installation flexibility. In addition, no thread taper sealant allows for a faster installation and can help you save time and money on the job site. To learn more, visit tyco-fire.com/Rapid Seal-FSP. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Fire Sprinkler Podcast. This is another technical episode of the podcast where I talk with Hilary from Johnson Controls. We're talking about the new Tyco Rapid Seal. We get into kind of how Tyco decided to get back into the gasket game as opposed to the O-ring game, the benefits of using these things, speed, time, cost effectiveness, things like that. Thanks everybody for supporting the podcast as usual. Not going to get into the whole spiel on thanking everybody, but you know where I sit with that. Thanks everybody for the support. www.firesprinklerpodcast.com, social media, #FireSprinklerPodcast, all that jazz. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Hilary from Johnson Controls. Enjoy.
Like and subscribe.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Fire Sprinkler Podcast. On this episode, I talked to Hilary from Johnson Controls about Tyco's Rapid Seal product line. Hilary, how's it going today?
Hi Chris, great. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. I got a box of goodies from you guys a couple weeks ago, containing a lot of different CPVC fittings that I've been monkeying around with and playing with, and a couple tools. Kind of what is the basis of the Rapid Seal technology?
Yeah, sure. So in August, we launched our expanded and redesigned line of Rapid Seal adapters. And what I'll mention is that we originally launched this product line back in 2018. With this more recent launch, we added 7 new fitting configurations to the product line, and then also redesigned the 5 fittings that we had been selling in the market for the past few years. The basis for the design is to save fire sprinkler installers time and money in not having to use dope or tape when installing sprinklers in sprinkler head adapters. There's some additional benefits, but the main one is time savings during installation.
It seems to be the name of the game for everybody in the industry, as far as manufacturers and things like that are concerned right now, is to save the time and save the money, which is always good for contractors like myself. Before we get going a little bit too far into the Rapid Seal, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and your involvement with Johnson Controls?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the global product manager for residential sprinklers and CPVC at Johnson Controls. I've been with Johnson Controls for 5 years, having started out with Tyco Fire Protection Products, as most people know, eventually merged with Johnson Controls. I started out in a product marketing role under our special hazards business for foam and foam hardware, and then moved into the sprinkler business about 4 years ago, and moved into my current product management role about 3 years ago. I have a business background, so I'm not a technical expert, I would say, but I am surrounded by a great team of engineers and technical folks that really help make my job easy.
And we had a chat a couple weeks ago, kind of a kickoff, talking generally about what we were going to be talking about today. We've kind of picked a few talking points regarding this. The main concern that I had going into this conversation was going to be about introducing a gasket back into the sprinkler area of the system. So I know it's, even looking at the thing, it's not an O-ring. So to say you're going to have the same problems as the O-rings might be incorrect, but what was the thought process kind of around the table when somebody was like, hey, what if we go back to the gasket / O-ring?
Yeah, sure. And I'm glad you asked the question, because it's a question we get a lot. And let me first speak to why we have a negative connotation with O-rings. The infamous O-ring situation occurred as a result of the O-ring serving as the sprinkler activation mechanism in the old Omega sprinklers. The O-ring would stick in some instances, resulting in the sprinkler not activating. And what I'll say about the Rapid Seal gasket is that it is a gasket. It has a different geometry, if you will, than a typical O-ring. And it has nothing to do with the sprinkler's activation mechanism. It simply takes the place of the typical seal that occurs on NPT threads mating together when installed with dope or tape. So it has no other bearing on the sprinkler itself. The gasket design is unique in that it has a flat face. So picture a rectangular cross section, and that rectangular face engages with the end of the sprinkler threads. So pinching and or rolling is highly improbable. Yeah, so really it was around the sealing mechanism, and there are other products out in the field that utilize O-rings or gaskets. But what I will tell you is that these products go through extensive testing to meet agency criteria for the listing. So yeah, we really put this through a battery of tests, both through agency and internally at Johnson Controls, and we've seen great results with it thus far.
And it is a fairly thick gasket. It's almost 1/4 of an inch thick on the sealing end. And if you look at the fittings, you guys can't see it because this is a podcast, but I'll pop some pictures up and a video up. But when you take the gasket out with the pick that you guys also sent me, thank you very much. You sent me a whole package of things. The gasket replacement tool, which is actually kind of handy to use and almost required to use to get the gaskets back in. It's a thick gasket, and the threads on the fitting itself, number one, they're CPVC, which we can talk about in a second. Number two, they're fairly shallow, where it doesn't, the extent of the threads doesn't go all the way down to the gasket itself. So your threads are not being used for sealant per se, but more engagement to the gasket itself. Would that be an accurate way of describing how the product works?
Yep. So the seal is occurring at the gasket itself.
And I'm assuming when you're installing these, are there specific torque requirements, or is it the typical kind of grab it and go with sprinkler where it's when it's tight, it's tight?
Yeah, so no torque wrench is required with this product. I'll mention that up front. If you were to be using a torque wrench, all that's required is 5 to 7 foot-pounds. And our installation instructions are pretty simple, which is part of the appeal of this product. So it's just hand tighten plus 1/2 to 1 full turn with a manufacturer's certified wrench. So pretty quick and easy, even compared to when threading into a brass inserted adapter. It's, you know, you're only turning the sprinkler about half of what you would do with a brass inserted adapter.
It's an interesting way. It's going to save you a little bit of time and money on doping and taping up a bunch of different sprinklers. Talk about the plastic CPVC threads a little bit, because I know coming from the installation background, there was always a fear of cross threading the sprinklers when you go to install them into the fittings. What did you guys do to kind of mitigate that possibility this time around?
Yeah, and you're hitting on another point that we get asked about all the time. What I will say is that there's no agency test that specifically addresses or simulates cross-threading. That being said, we really focused on this during our development effort internally. I'll say it's nearly impossible to cross-thread this. You would experience immediately extreme resistance, and you would know right away that the threads were not aligned correctly. Remember, you're starting out with your hand by hand tightening this. I know most people in the field have a lot of experience, with installing sprinklers into adapters. Even if you don't, you're going to know something is not right almost immediately. You would need poor axial alignment when engaging this sprinkler threading with the adapter. And then on top of that, you would need really, really high perpendicular force. So again, you're everybody has common sense. You're going to know that this is not, this doesn't feel right. And you really wouldn't be able to get it to even start the cross threading.
That's a dangerous comment to make. Everybody has common sense.
No, I do. Oh yeah, for sure. But I would, what I would say is try to play around with it, try to cross thread it. That's what we did. We've given this to customers and kind of challenged them to try to cross thread it and see just how difficult it is. So yeah, we feel pretty confident in just how coarse our threading is, and the installation process that we outline, I think, is simple enough that almost anyone can do it.
Right. And I mean, I'm playing with the product while we're talking here, and I got a sprinkler. I put it in on probably a 30-degree angle and started trying to get the thread caught. And I mean, if you were to do that, number one, common sense would kick in. I hope everybody here listening has somewhat common sense. If you're listening to a fire protection based podcast, you're probably fairly invested in the industry and care about what you're doing. So number one, if you were to get it caught, I mean, it only took about a quarter of a turn to get it to where it was tight, and that's not hand tight for a sprinkler. And number two, you would notice it's not coming straight out of the fitting. You're not going to get the with the older style threaded fittings, you could almost get a couple threads in hand tight with the cross thread. It was a little bit softer material almost.
Yeah. Yep.
It would be a little bit of a fight to get it going to where you
it would.
And
as I'm sure you've experienced, the feel that you get when you install a sprinkler in the adapter correctly, it's very smooth.
Yep.
So once you do one of these, you know what it should feel like.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like threading in a clean thread, right? It feels no different until you bottom out on that gasket, and then you got another half turn essentially, and that's actually really good to know, because I mean, hand tight's hand tight, right? Like you can, if you're cranking it in with your hand and then you're going another half turn from there, that's not hand tight. That being said, it is a fairly thick gasket. Can't tell if it's really malleable or not in my hand, but it moves around a little bit. So you would almost have to go probably more than a full turn if you before you caused any damage to the fitting itself.
Yeah. Yep. There's the installation instructions, as I mentioned, are hand tighten plus 1/2 to 1 full turn. That's really all you need. The fitting itself can withstand much more than that, but what you don't want to do is really over tighten the sprinkler, because that could impact the gasket. But again, the testing that the gasket goes through, there is some margin for error, but follow the installation instructions as closely as possible.
Just because you guys tested it to a higher torque does not mean that anybody else should.
Correct.
I'll leave the system failing.
Yes, that is correct.
What about as far as pressure requirements on these systems or on these fittings? Is there a max, because it is kind of a different setup? You're not putting any kind of thread sealant or anything on it. Is there a max pressure that you're allowed to install these systems on?
Yeah, so the max system operating pressure is rated for 175 psi, and then it's recommended to conduct post-system installation hydrostatic leak test at 50 psi over the system operating pressure, so up to 225 psi.
Right.
And that being said, we've tested this far beyond those pressures. So in some cases, up to 10 times those operating pressures, and they were able to withstand those pressures without leaking or cracking.
Right, which as most people know in here, obviously anybody listening here would know that obviously high pressures with CPVC can get dangerous pretty quick. One thing that I don't think we talked about prior to coming on here, but are these listed to be used on like low pressure air dry systems?
Yes, they are.
They are. Okay. That's that's interesting as well. Obviously, you're not going to test high pressures with these things either, but that's good to know that they're listed for all different applications essentially any application you can use CPVC, and these are available to be used.
Correct.
Okay. We talked about not needing any dope or Teflon in here. What can happen if somebody maybe grabs a 1x1/2 coupling out of the bag without realizing that it's this new product and installs Teflon or dope on it?
Yeah, so first off, and we already discussed this, but the reason for not using not having to use dope or tape is the time installations here. So you would just be wasting time if you did decide to use it. But if you did not realize the product that you were using, it can be dangerous. It can create a leak path. So we have made an effort since launching these in 2018. We've made a real effort to communicate the installation process to the field, even up until about a year ago, putting a label on every single fitting that we sold that says, do not use dope or tape.
Idiot proof, completely idiot proof.
Yeah, and there are other products in the field that have a similar installation process that customers, that contractors have used in the past, and they're becoming more familiar with that installation process. But if you were to use dope or tape, it could result in two things happening. So one, the sprinkler would not be securely held into the fitting, so it would be basically too easily to unthread it due to friction reduction, and that could result in a leak. And then additionally, if you had Teflon tape between the end of the sprinkler and the gasket, that could also result in leakage. So it is critical to not use dope or tape when installing sprinklers in Rapid Seal adapters.
Just like everything else in the industry, install per manufacturer's directions and you should be good to go.
Exactly.
The cost savings on these, do you guys have any kind of a calculation done to determine how much money people are going to save by switching from a regular 1x1/2 sprinkler adapter to these Rapid Seals?
Yeah, I wouldn't put a dollar figure out there. I'd relate it more so to time savings, and obviously that comes down to the specific installer who's actually using these, how much experience they have, how quickly they go about doing their job, what process they use. But the savings come down to the amount of time it takes to apply dope or tape primarily, and then also the number of turns required is, as I mentioned, it's about half of what's required with a brass threaded adapter. So we would estimate about 5 to 10 seconds per sprinkler head. Additionally, you don't need to be carrying dope or tape. If you're, obviously if you're using some brass adapters, then you would, but if you're using all Rapid Seal adapters, then you would not need to carry those other products on a job.
So you're kind of a slight savings on manpower, but you're getting more of your savings on your consumable goods as far as Teflon tape, pipe dope, things like that, and things that are required to be on a job site.
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome.
Exactly.
You've got a couple fittings here that are, it's a 1x1/2 coupling or a 3/4x1/2 coupling, but it fits inside the 1-inch coupling. Is that essentially you've made a bushing / coupling for the sprinkler installation, which is really handy as far as not having 1,000 different fittings on a job site. What was kind of the idea behind creating that fitting, that the outside dimensions fit inside the, well, that's going to be confusing as heck to explain.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, the
Yeah, so
3/4x1/2 bushing fits inside the 1x1/2 socket section of the thing. So what was the kind of the idea behind that? Was it simply to make it easier for the guys installing the piping, ordering less material, things like that?
Yeah, that's what it came down to. It also made it easier on our end. We initially had these with our initial launch back in 2018. We had these as 2 separate fittings, and our brilliant engineer who worked on this project, he came up with the concept of creating a dual purpose fitting. So combining 2 designs into one. That serves both applications. So there's some positive inventory implications. As you said, you don't need to carry as much inventory if you're, or as many parts for customers who use both of these fittings. So yeah, we've received good feedback. There was, I know, initially some confusion from customers who used to buy them as separate parts, but we've done a pretty good job of educating on how this can now be used for both applications.
Yeah, I wasn't sure initially when I realized it kind of fit inside the one and then fit outside the other. I was thrown off like, oh, I wonder if they know this, or I wonder if it's listed for that or something like that. And then I looked at the fitting and it was actually identified. And I was like, oh, well, I guess it's nothing new
Yep.
for anybody else. Um, I'm assuming there's no, I mean, it's pretty, like you say, common sense goes a long way with things like this, but is there any kind of special, in addition to the regular BlazeMaster CPVC installation training, is there any additional training that would be required or recommended by the manufacturer to install this? I mean, it'd be a short class, really. Install per BlazeMaster specifications, don't use thread and tape. But do you guys have any kind of additional training for this?
Yeah, our sales team is equipped to conduct trainings if needed. We don't require any training, but because the installation process is different from that of brass inserted adapters, we strongly urge installers to become familiar with the process and communicate it to their field teams. So we do have training materials available that are to our sales team for them to conduct trainings, and they're more than happy to give a little lesson if contractors need it. And the same would go for the gasket replacement process. And that process has remained the same since we launched the product back in 2018. But that one is a little more, it's newer than, it's a newer installation process than actually threading sprinklers into the adapters. So we're equipped to provide trainings on both of those if needed.
If, like I say, if anybody actually needs the additional training for this, because I mean, you're untraining something as opposed to retraining something. You're kind of untraining them from applying Teflon or dope to every single thread. You got to kind of get that out of the guys. But there's still guys out there that thread, the union components that thread together just because they think that the dope is a thread and not a lubricant. It's it's an industry thing that it just kind of never goes away. You have threads, you use Teflon or dope. It's just a thing right now that you do.
Yeah, and hopefully in 5-10 years, it's a thing you won't have to do at all.
That's right. Yeah, it seems like a lot of people are getting away from the dope and the tape and different kind of consumables, finding different ways to connect sprinkler pipe together. There's other manufacturers that are coming out with some interesting stuff, which I'm not going to pump their tires today, but there's some cool stuff in the industry right now. Tyco's obviously coming out with a lot of really interesting fire protection stuff, and the industry is evolving fast. Part of the reason why I started doing this podcast is so that I could stay kind of up to date with the new stuff that's coming out, because it's almost impossible nowadays for a regular fitter in the field to stay current with every different manufacturer's new products that are out there.
Yeah,
Number one, it
and they're
gets
out
me a
doing
chance to
their
talk to
job
people.
and don't always get a chance to pause and take a look to see what manufacturers are communicating, what new products that they're launching. So I think having this forum is really cool.
It's been really good. I've learned a lot in the past oh my goodness, it's almost been 3 years. The past 3 years that I've been doing this for, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without the support from companies like Tyco for coming on and kind of sharing with me. So thank you very much for that. We talked briefly, we kind of touched on the gaskets, replacing the gaskets and the tools and stuff like that. Is there any kind of maintenance or additional preventative maintenance requirements for these gaskets? If you install it, does it have to be replaced every kind of 10, 15, 20 years? Standard response sprinklers are test or replace every 50 years, quick response are every 20 years. Do you guys have something like that with the gasket where at 15 years the gasket has to be replaced or serviced or lubricated or something like that? Or is it it's good to go as soon as it goes in?
Nope, the gasket is good for the life of the sprinkler. The only nuance to that is if you were to replace the sprinkler 6 months after originally installing it, you would need to replace the gasket, and that has to do with the compression set the gasket undergoes. during its lifetime. So meaning after 6 months, if a sprinkler or pipe plug is removed, the integrity of the seal has been compromised due to the material not springing back, if you will, to its original shape and dimensions. But if you do not replace that sprinkler, the gasket is good for the life of the sprinkler.
Yeah, these gaskets kind of seem like they may be very similar to a lot of old school fitters in the industry, where once they're set in their ways, they stick to it. So I'm not saying to replace the old school fitters by any means, but yeah, it's just after 6 months, if there's an issue where you have to change a sprinkler out, if you have a fire in a building, et cetera, replace the gasket. I know there's no manufacturer requirements, but possibly might be something to put in the verbiage of NFPA, where if something like this is installed in a building, spare gaskets and the replacement tool would be provided as well. Because I can see maybe it not being a slow start to the industry, but change is hard to come by in the fire protection industry. So if contractor A is using this product and contractor B is not, contractor A doesn't get the maintenance contract, but contractor B does, but doesn't have the tools to replace the gasket. Would you recommend installing the system and throwing the tool kind of next to the spare sprinkler box in the valve room as well?
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah, just a couple set of gaskets. I can't imagine these gaskets being very expensive, but something to have from a service point of view. You know, a lot of large contracts guys maybe aren't thinking about the service guys down the road, and it'll save you a lot of time and headaches down the road if you just think about it a little bit more.
That's a very good point.
Awesome. Hilary, is there anything else you want to make sure that everybody's aware of with this product, or have we kind of touched on everything at this point?
I think we touched on all the big points, Chris. Yeah, we're really excited about this product line. We've had a lot of great feedback since launching the product in 2018. We're happy to extend the product line to offer additional configurations that are pretty, pretty unique. They're more compact. They can be used in more applications. I'll call out one of those applications. So our elbow and T adapters can actually fit with concealed sidewall sprinklers in 2x4 construction without having to downsize pipe. And that is a key differentiator. I know we're seeing more and more concealed sidewall sprinklers used in the field, and the fact that these fit compactly with that somewhat bulky sprinkler is a key differentiator.
Absolutely, yeah, it is a pretty thin kind of socket to socket, 3.5 inches. So with drywall, yeah, I'm looking at the 1/1/2 cross, where it's 1 inch feeding through the middle and 1/2 inch outlets on the outside. That would essentially fit through a 2x4 wall, I would think, with an escutcheon and sprinkler on either side.
Yeah, yep.
Awesome. It's a neat product. Thanks for coming on the Fire Sprinkler Podcast and talking about it. Is there anything else you want to let people know about, where they can find information about the product, things like that?
Yeah, what I would say is reach out to your local sales representative or customer service rep, or I'm available as well to take questions. So feel free to reach out to any Johnson Controls contact that you have, and we'd be happy to set you up with some Rapid Seal adapters.
Absolutely. And of course, tyco-fire.com/Rapid Seal-FSP is a link that you can get more information on this product. Hilary, thanks for coming on. It's always a pleasure talking to the people from Johnson Controls.
We enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, this episode of the Fire Sprinkler Podcast is done. If you liked this episode, leave a review, comment, or hop over to my social media pages and let me know. Just search Fire Sprinkler Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Don't forget to hashtag Fire Sprinkler Podcast and anything you think I should know about or see. If you have any suggestions for future episodes of the Fire Sprinkler Podcast, email info@firesprinklerpodcast.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Take care.